Hashtag the Meridian. I was a homeless Navy SEAL who bought a rusted cruise ship for $11,000. Then my dog uncovered a hidden deed worth $75 million. Beneath the cold rain of an Oregon harbor, I thought I was buying nothing more than a floating place to sleep. Broken by loss, haunted by war, with nobody left but my old German shepherd, Bear, I stepped aboard a ship everyone else had given up on. But deep inside those rusted steel walls, Bear found a secret that had stayed hidden for 40 years. One that would expose powerful men, reveal a forgotten fortune, and change more lives than I could count. Comment 1 if you'd have followed Bear into that ship. 0 if you'd have walked away. And tell us where you're watching from. Rain fell over Cascade Bay the way it always did in late November. Steady cold, relentless. The gray sky pressed low over the harbor until sea and clouds became one endless sheet of steel. Few people noticed a man walking along Pier 12. The ones who did looked away fast. I'd become part of the scenery. My name's Gabe Holloway. At 58, I still carried myself like the soldier I used to be, but time had left its marks. Deep lines, a beard gone mostly gray, shoulders that once hauled heavy packs across deserts thousands of miles away. Beside me walked Bear, my German shepherd, black and tan touched with silver around the muzzle, amber eyes never stopping, glancing back at me every few seconds to make sure I was still there. 12 years we'd been together. He'd served beside me on my last deployments. Explosions, ambushes, long nights when neither of us knew if we'd see morning. Now we survived something different. Loneliness. I pulled the last of my money out of my pocket and counted it twice. $23, damp from the rain. Not enough for a motel. Just enough to get through another day. 5 years earlier, my wife, Diane, had died after a sudden illness, and everything afterward happened fast. Medical bills, lost work, the quiet collapse of a life that had felt solid. I lost the house, then the truck, then nearly everything else. Everything except Bear. He never left. Not once. We were passing a chain-link fence around an old shipyard when I saw the banner. Public auction, vessels, equipment, salvage. Beyond the fence sat dozens of forgotten boats and one massive ship that dominated everything around it. Its white paint had faded to dirty gray, rust streaking down the hull like dried blood. The Meridian, the name read, barely visible. A worker told me a cruise line went bankrupt years back. Too expensive to restore. Too ugly to save. The crowd laughed, but something pulled at me. The ship looked the way I felt, forgotten, broken, abandoned by everyone who once cared. And Bear, who never reacted to objects, stood and pressed against the fence, eyes locked on it, a low sound deep in his throat. Not a growl. Recognition. The auction opened the cruise ship at $10,000. Silence. Nobody raised a hand. The Meridian had become the local joke. I thought about the small envelope in my pocket, the last of the insurance money I protected for years. $11,000. My entire future. I remembered another decision, years back, a difficult military dog nobody wanted, everyone telling me not to take him. Best decision of my life. So I raised my hand. The crowd turned and laughed. The auctioneer blinked. Nobody challenged me. The gavel struck. Sold. A worker shook his head as I signed the papers. That thing's dying. I looked at the rusted hull, the broken windows, the loneliness of it. Maybe, I said, but everybody deserves one more chance. When the crowd cleared, a single beam of sunlight broke through the clouds and touched the hull, and for just a moment the dying ship almost looked alive. Bear wagged his tail. Once. Twice. A rare thing from that disciplined old dog. Neither of us knew yet that hidden deep inside the steel was a secret powerful enough to change both our lives. The gangway creaked as we boarded that night. The grand lobby had been beautiful once. Curved staircase, dusty chandeliers, water stains down the walls. Bear cleared the room like he was back on a mission, the old habits never gone. We found a sound, dry crew cabin near the center of the ship and made a home. He circled twice and settled near the door. Always near the door. Always watching. That first night, the desert came back the way it always did. Heat, dust, the explosion, the screams, faces I'd spent years trying to forget, men who never came home. My breathing went ragged. Then a cold nose touched my hand, and I jerked awake to the dark cabin. Bear stood beside the bunk, watching the way he'd done hundreds of times. He pressed against me, solid, real, present, and the panic faded. Thanks, buddy. The next afternoon, I found temporary work, then stopped at a small diner near the water called the Anchor Cafe. A waitress in her early 40s, brown hair tied back, kind eyes that had clearly seen hardship, came over with a coffee pot. "You own that shepherd? Beautiful dog." She didn't stare at my worn clothes, didn't rush away. "Nora Bennett," she said. When she realized I was the guy who'd bought the cruise ship, she leaned in. "For what it's worth, I think it's brave." I told her most people thought it was stupid. "Most people never try anything," she said. That stuck with me. Kindness had gotten rare. Over the next weeks, a routine formed. Morning work, afternoon repairs, evenings aboard the Meridian. I cleared debris, patched leaks, made slow progress. Every repaired section felt like a small victory. Bear went everywhere with me. Then, one afternoon, while I was fixing a stairwell near the center of the ship, he disappeared below deck for hours and started barking. Not playful. Urgent. Sharp. I grabbed a flashlight and followed the sound down to an old maintenance corridor near the lower levels, the air colder and heavier there. Bear stood at the end of the hall, rigid, scratching furiously at a steel wall. Claws on metal, again and again. The wall looked ordinary, just another rusted bulkhead. But he wouldn't stop. He pressed his nose to the steel, listening the same way he detected hidden compartments and concealed doors years ago overseas. He kept it up for days. Every morning, every afternoon, every night, no matter what I tried. On the fourth day, Nora came by with sandwiches. When I explained it, she shrugged. Maybe he hears something. Maybe something trapped. That evening we investigated together. She tapped the wall and frowned. That sounds strange. I tapped it too. A faint, hollow echo, barely there but real. Bear barked once, sharp, like he'd finally gotten us to listen. The next morning, I bought old ship diagrams from the Harbor Records office and measured everything. The corridor was wrong, short by nearly 8 feet. According to the blueprints, there should have been a compartment beyond that wall. A compartment that appeared not to exist. Then I spotted it near the floor, hidden under decades of corrosion. A thin seam. Not a structural joint. Something added later. Something concealed. For the first time since buying the Meridian, I wasn't looking at rusted steel. I was looking at a secret. It took a full day with a cutting torch to get through. Whoever sealed that wall wanted it hidden permanently. When the panel finally shifted with a loud crack, cold, dry, ancient air rushed out. Bear went in first, nose working. I lifted my flashlight and stepped through. The room beyond didn't belong to the rest of the ship. Maybe 20 by 30 feet, clean, dry, organized, protected. Metal shelving, cabinets, locked drawers, file boxes. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to preserve this space. Against the far wall stood a heavy, fireproof steel cabinet. Inside, on the lowest shelf, sat a sealed metal cylinder about 3 feet long with one faded, readable word, property records. We carried it to a table. When it opened, rolled documents slid out, dozens of them. Deeds, ownership papers, contracts, property transfers. Some dated back 40 years. Many referenced shipping terminals, warehouses, coastal land, business holdings scattered across multiple states, and several names I recognized for corporations I'd thought no longer existed. Nora, who joined me, looked stunned. We read until midnight, and the more I read, the less sense it made. There was a story buried in those papers. An important one, but I couldn't see the whole picture alone. Near the bottom of one document was the name of a Seattle maritime law firm. I called the next morning, expecting to be brushed off. A calm voice answered. When I said I'd found old property deeds, she got cautious. When she asked what ship, and I said the Meridian, there was complete silence for 5 full seconds. I think we should meet. 3 days later, a black SUV rolled into Cascade Bay, and a woman stepped out, mid-40s, sharp blue eyes, leather briefcase. Claire Whitman, maritime attorney. She paused to study the ship, and I noticed she wasn't looking at it like a lawyer. She was looking at it like someone seeing a ghost. Bear gave her his version of a background check, sniffed her hand, and stepped aside. She passed. The moment she entered the hidden archive, her expression changed. She pulled folder after folder, eyes widening. Then she sat me down. These companies officially collapsed 40 years ago, she said. Everyone assumed the ownership records were lost. But they weren't. These established ownership chains, legal rights, property claims, everything. She looked around the room. If these authenticate, the value exceeds $75 million. I actually laughed because it sounded absurd. Bear rested his head against my leg, grounding me. Claire smiled faintly. Then her face darkened. There's a problem. Fortunes don't disappear by accident. Neither do ownership records. The question isn't why these were hidden. It's who wanted them hidden. Bear suddenly lifted his head, staring toward the corridor. The moment passed, but the unease stayed. Nothing leaves this ship, Claire said quietly. Because if I'm right, someone may already be looking for these. For days, an uneasy routine held. Then Bear started warning me about a black SUV parked near an abandoned warehouse across the harbor. There yesterday, the day before, never moving, just watching. Then a teenager's drone circled the ship, photographing every deck until Bear's barking drove it off. The photos hit local social media. Homeless veterans' mystery ship discovery. Thousands of views. People were connecting the Meridian to old shipping companies. Claire was furious. Attention attracts curiosity. Curiosity attracts problems. Then came the man himself. A sleek black sedan, a tall figure in an expensive coat, silver hair, the posture of someone used to getting what he wanted. Bear placed himself between us before the man reached the gangway, a low growl building. Marcus Thorne, he said, smiling without his eyes joining in. He wanted to buy the ship. Immediately, I laughed and said I wasn't selling. He opened a folder, $3 million. No negotiations. Funds available now. For a rusting cruise ship I'd bought for $11,000. When I asked why, he said, historical value. We both knew that was a lie. Not interested. His smile vanished for just a second before he handed me a card and left. Bear stared after the sedan long after it was gone. That night, around 2 a.m, Bear exploded off the floor barking and sprinted for the corridor. The seal came back before the homeless man could think. I heard it, a metallic clang from the lower decks. Not the ship settling. Someone else. Bear cornered a shadow deep in the maintenance hall. The figure froze, then ran, and a distant door slammed. I found a maintenance hatch with fresh tool marks around the forced lock. This wasn't random. Someone had boarded the Meridian, searching for the archive. The danger wasn't coming. It was already here. I installed 3 salvage yard security cameras. 2 days later, Claire arrived faster than usual, pale. I've confirmed the deeds. They're authentic. 75 million, possibly more. Then she pulled out a thicker, older folder. But these don't fit. They're not property records. They're internal correspondence, confidential reports. She pointed to a highlighted paragraph. Missing assets, hidden transfers, false accounting. The same powerful family names appeared again and again. Shipping magnates, political donors, people whose descendants were still influential. These aren't just deeds, she said. They're evidence. A fraud. Then Bear stood, walked to an old rusted filing cabinet in the corner, and pawed at the floor, the exact same behavior as before. I crouched and felt an uneven seam in the metal, hidden under grime. It took an hour to move the cabinet, hundreds of pounds, and underneath was a square panel built into the floor. Inside the compartment sat a single waterproof case. No gold, no triasure, just one case. When Claire opened it, the color drained from her face. Investigations, witness statements, private ledgers, correspondence connecting multiple powerful individuals to the fraud, names, dates, transactions. Enough to destroy reputations and trigger lawsuits. Now I understand why someone boarded this ship, Claire said. They didn't come for money. They came for this. Powerful people can ignore a lost fortune. They rarely ignore evidence. The storm hit on a Thursday, a major Pacific system bearing down on the coast. By 9 that night, power failed across the harbor district, and the Meridian groaned in the dark, lit only by battery lanterns. Bear-paced, restless, the way he had before missions. Around 11, he snapped to his feet, rigid, growling that low warning I knew too well. I checked the camera monitors. A shadow moved across one screen, then another. People were aboard. Bear sprinted into the hallway, and I followed, the years falling away, training, instinct, focus all returning. The ship became a maze of shadows, thunder shaking the steel, lightning flashing white through broken windows. The intruders moved like they knew exactly where they were going, straight toward the archive. Bear stayed ahead, turning corners, tracking, moving like a dog half his age. Then a crash echoed from below, followed by a sharp yelp. The sound froze me. Bear! No answer. Only another cry. I sprinted down a stairwell into a storage section and found him standing near a shelving unit. Still ready, still trying to work, but blood stained his shoulder, mixing with rainwater on the steel floor. A deep cut. He took a shaky step toward me, still trying to protect me, even hurt. That hit harder than the storm, harder than the intruders. Because Bear wasn't just a dog. He was the last constant in a life full of loss. I dropped beside him, my hands moving on their own. Pressure assessment, the combat medical training taking over. He leaned into me, trusting completely, and never whimpered again. The intruders were gone, driven off by the chaos, or by Bear himself. None of that mattered. Only one thing did. You stay with me. Claire arrived and went pale at the blood. For the first time that night, fear showed in my eyes, not for me, for him. The roads flooded. No vet could reach us. We were alone with the storm. Around midnight, Nora somehow made it aboard, soaked to the skin, and knelt without a word to help, holding lights, fetching towels. The hours blurred into thunder and bandages and worry. After 1 in the morning, Bear slipped into unconsciousness, and old fears surfaced. Loss, failure, survivor's guilt. My chest tightened. Then, for the first time in years, I stopped running from it. There were 6 of us, I said quietly. Nora went still. In the convoy, we were all supposed to come home. But we didn't. Bear had found the danger before any of us, saved lives, but not all of them. I couldn't save everybody. The words were years overdue. Nora put a hand on my shoulder. That wasn't your fault. You saved who you could. Bear shifted slightly at the sound of my voice. Claire whispered, I think he heard you. By 3, the storm weakened. Bear's breathing steadied. The bleeding stopped, and hope crept back like sunrise on a far horizon. Near dawn, I sat alone beside him, remembering the military kennel where I'd found a stubborn shepherd nobody wanted. Then his eyes opened, just slightly, and looked right at me. Relief crashed through me so hard I laughed out loud. Welcome back. His tail moved twice. He wasn't out of danger, but he'd survived the night. 3 days later, sunlight returned. Bear rested in a restored crew cabin, healing slowly, his eyes always finding me first when I entered. The storm had forced me to face things I'd buried for years. The guilt, the grief, and something inside me had begun, finally, to heal. For the first time, I could remember Diane without the pain immediately swallowing me. Then Claire found one more thing buried beneath the storage ledgers. A sealed envelope, yellowed, protected in wax paper, one line across the front. To the Guardian who finds this. Inside were handwritten pages signed by Captain Edward Calloway, the final captain of the Meridian. I read it aloud. He wrote about the corruption, the disappearing assets, the manipulated records, the way evidence had vanished while powerful men protected themselves. So he made a choice to preserve everything. Not for money, for history, for accountability. Then came the lines that stopped me cold. Asterisk, there may come a day when someone discovers this archive. That person will likely not be wealthy. They will likely not be powerful. They will likely understand loss. Because only someone who has lost something truly understands the importance of preserving what remains. Asterisk, my throat tightened. The captain's words felt less like a letter and more like a mirror. Asterisk, if you have found this archive, then perhaps you are the guardian I hoped for. Protect the truth. The value lies not in ownership. The value lies in remembrance. Asterisk. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Claire finally said, the captain wasn't hiding wealth. He was preserving truth. And somehow your dog found it. She smiled. I think he underestimated one thing. The guardian wasn't alone. Without Bear, refusing to stop scratching at that wall, none of it would have happened. The transformation started quietly. No cameras, not even Kutin. Just a handful of people on a cold Saturday morning. Then more, retired welders, dock workers, carpenters, fishermen, teachers, veterans, even high school students looking for volunteer hours. By 8, almost 20 people stood at the gangway. They came to help, Norris said. The real story had spread. A forgotten ship, a hidden archive, a veteran who refused to sell, and a dog who uncovered the truth. People wanted to believe forgotten things could still matter. The work ran for weeks. Rust vanished under fresh paint. Railings got replaced. Lights came back on. Claire fought the legal battles, protecting the archive, verifying claims, working with museums and historical groups. We formed a nonprofit, the Meridian Heritage Foundation, with a simple mission: preserve history, educate future generations, support veterans rebuilding their lives. Donations started arriving. And for the first time since Diane died, I felt something I hadn't in years. Belonging. The ship wasn't the only thing being restored. So was I. One evening, Nora found me at the bow watching the sunset, Bear resting beside me. I spent a long time believing I didn't have a place anymore, I told her. I thought my story was finished. She looked out at the ocean. But it wasn't. The silence between us was the comfortable kind, the kind that doesn't need filling. Later, Claire found an old photograph of Captain Calloway standing in the very hallway where Bear found the wall, his hand resting against the exact section where the archive was hidden, as though he already knew. He believed someone would find it, she said. And he was right. When a reporter asked why I didn't just sell everything, I watched a little boy carefully pet Bear and answered, because some things are worth more than money. Purpose. By spring, people stopped calling it the ship nobody wanted. They called it the ship that came back. The first anniversary arrived under clear summer skies. Where a rusting ghost had once been abandoned to decay, the Meridian now gleamed white, brass polished, windows sparkling, flowers along the gangway. More than 2,000 people came for the grand opening of the Meridian Maritime Heritage Center. A year earlier, nobody wanted the ship. Now, people traveled across the country to see it. I stood near the bow in a simple navy blazer, Bear beside me. Older, slower, more gray in his muzzle, a faint scar beneath his fur, but his eyes still sharp and proud. Nora handed me a coffee. She and her son, Tyler, had become family. So had a lot of the people gathered on the docks. The loneliness that once defined my life had quietly disappeared. Through time, through trust, through people who chose to stay. When my turn came to speak, the crowd applauded, and the sound surprised me. A year ago, most of them would have walked past me without a glance. I didn't come here looking for treasure, I told them. I came here looking for a place to sleep. They laughed. Then I talked about second chances, for a ship, for a community, for a man who thought his life was over. Afterward, Claire took the microphone holding a thick folder. I have one final announcement. The captain, she explained, had established a trust 40 years ago, designed to support whoever eventually became the guardian of the archive. It's been legally transferred. It provides financial security for Gabe Holloway for the rest of his life. The applause was thunderous. For years I'd worried about surviving another week. Now survival was no longer the question. The future was. And while the crowd cheered, I found myself looking at Bear, unimpressed by applause, uninterested in money, focused only on me. The same as always. Later a boy, maybe 10, pointed at a photograph of Bear sitting beside the hidden wall. Mister, who found the treasure? I looked at the real Bear, dozing beneath a display. Him. The boy's eyes went wide. The dog. The dog. A few weeks after, we opened the final exhibit. At its center stood a simple bronze plaque that visitors stopped at more than any other. Asterisk Bear. Loyal partner, protector, discoverer. His courage preserved the truth. His loyalty changed lives. Astor's children left flowers. Veterans paused in silence. Bear sometimes slept right beside it, completely unaware he'd become a legend. One evening, a year and a half after I bought the ship, I stood alone on the observation deck. The harbor glowed beneath the sunset. Bear rested at my side, content at peace. I reached down and rested a hand on his neck, and he leaned into me, and every memory came back. The homelessness, the storms, the discovery, the fear, the healing. Thank you, partner. He closed his eyes. Far below, visitors laughed as they explored the ship. Life, hope, community, the things I thought I'd lost forever. The Meridian sailed nowhere, yet somehow it carried thousands of people forward. And at the heart of it was a simple truth I'd finally learned. Legacy isn't measured by what we keep. It's measured by what we protect and what we choose to share. If Bear's loyalty and the second chances in this story meant something to you, comment 1 below. Comment 0 if you believe every forgotten thing deserves another chance. In life, it's not what we own that defines us, but what we protect when no one is watching. And if you enjoy stories about justice, dignity, and people who refuse to quit, subscribe and join us for the next journey.